Hey everyone, Neil here. I have Cristina Roman, who is the founder of Pique Coaching, a Washington, D.C. based certified life coach for business owners who are ready to kick their procrastination habit so they can take their projects and half finished to done. If you're a person who's surrounded by half finished projects in your business, you're in the right place. Cristina half jokes that she's the cross-legged coach. Her goal is always to keep things casual but wildly impactful for her clients. When she's not coaching and leading workshops, she's listening to reggaeton and Frank Sinatra, drinking Southern Pecan coffee, reading nonfiction, and going for long walks through DC. Sounds wonderful, Cristina. So great to have you.
It's a good life.
So Cristina, let's start here. How did you fall into helping business owners with procrastination?
Long, winding path. So I have known for about 10 years that I was going to become a life coach. The first time I heard what a life coach was, I was like, I'm going to do that. And then life took me in a bunch of different routes. So I started an online business, a community for women business owners in 2014. I was a recruiter, and then I was a customer success manager at a software company. And then last year, it feels like it's been years and years that I've been a coach, but last year I was standing on a street corner and I was like, it's go time. It's time to do my business. And so I don't know if you've experienced this in any way, but I started polling people around me and I was like, should I build my business on the side or should I go all in, just quit my job and go for the business? And most sane people were like, you should definitely build it on the side. And as soon as I heard them say that, I was like, no, like that's great advice, but I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm an all-in kind of person. And so I quit my job and just have been building the business for about 14 months now.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
How did that feel? How did it,
What was that?
tell me how that felt. Like I remember quitting beginning of 2017 and the emotions I was going through. So first of all, how did you plan for that quitting? What did you have in place? And then how did you, I guess, have the strength to follow through and grow the business?
It's so funny to hear you describe it that way, because I'm like, it was just, to me, it wasn't about mustering strength. It was more like, of course, this is it. I was born for this. Like, this has been a decade in the making. And so for me, I think the harder part than quitting and starting the business was staying at my job as long as I did. And being like, I know that there's more for me to learn in this corporate environment that I need to really master before I go out on my own. That was the hard part. But once I'd made the decision to quit, I was like, just all in. And what I realized is that I'm really risk tolerant. And I didn't really know that about myself. But as soon as I started talking to other people and people were like, yeah, it definitely doesn't make sense to just quit and go all in, I was like, oh yeah, I'm just really risk tolerant. And I had savings. I had been putting extra money into my 401k. So I had that, and I have a pretty nice cushion. So there's a lot of other factors too that definitely increased my security and my confidence. But yeah, it was just kind of a no-brainer. For you, tell me more about that.
That's amazing. So having financial savings and all of that in place was a very big part of me quitting. Yeah. However, I quit at a time when we were expecting our first baby, Sienna, who's now 3, just over. But for me, she was actually the reason why I ended up quitting, because we thought, okay, it's 6 months before she's born. It's kind of like a now or never moment. If I'm not going to quit now, how the hell am I going to quit when Sienna's born? So that was my, I guess, catalyst to finally doing it. It was something I was dreaming about and thinking about for 10 years, like honestly, and obsessing for 10 years, not just thinking, obsessing about having a business. So yeah, that was an emotional time for me. And it's interesting to see how you've grown the business over 14 months. And we're going to get into that a bit later on, like what strategies you've done, what's worked for you, so people listening in can really learn from you. When I look at your content and what you talk about and what you specialize in, life coach is definitely like this big, broad bracket, right? But when I look at what you do, it's very much about productivity, procrastination, as in helping people with procrastination, not procrastinating.
Only sometimes.
So how did you fall into that? How did you end up focusing on that? Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I realized I didn't answer that part of your question. So it has been, I like to describe it as my niche, and narrowing down has been like falling through a trap door over and over and over again. So I started out, I was like, I'm a life coach. And then I was like, wait a second, I'm going to be a life coach who focuses on productivity. And then I would start talking to people about productivity, and I would realize like, oh, the real struggle here is procrastination. Okay, I'm going to work with people who procrastinate. And then I would start talking to people who describe themselves as procrastinators, and they would be like, yeah, I mean, I've been a procrastinator my entire life. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to work with self-proclaimed lifelong procrastinators. And then I would talk to those people, and they would be like, yeah, I mean, I've tried everything already. And so then I was like, right, narrowing down, I was like, I'm going to work with self-proclaimed lifelong procrastinators who feel like they've tried everything already. And so bit by bit narrowing down, I will admit, I think I made this harder for myself, but at the same time, there's no way that I could have known a year ago that this micro challenge existed for this small group of people. The only way that I got that information was by narrowing and talking to people and narrowing and talking to people. So I think that that's helpful to hear as a business owner. If you're like, where the heck do I start? It's like, you start where you are and then you narrow. Do you have any thoughts on that approach?
Yeah, no, I love it. One thing that often comes up when I'm working with people is it's not necessarily the strategy that I'm going to share with them or the tactic. That's generally not the most important part. The root cause, which is a root cause that all of us suffer, is the fact that we're inside of our own heads. And the
100%.
minute we're in our own heads trying to debate something, trying to work it out, that's actually the point at which you should go, I now need to talk to my audience. So I need to go talk to someone else, like a mentor, or just someone else that appreciates your space, ideally a customer, or ideally a target audience that you're trying. If your procrastination issue is to do with, I guess, growing the business or the products, but depending on what it is, just talking to someone. Even often, with my wife, I'll talk to her, she has no idea about the thing that I'm talking to her about, but she's able to give me some insight because she's so far removed from it. So I really appreciate the fact that you just said, I wouldn't have known this until I had spoken to someone. So on that, is there one particular like common reason why people procrastinate that you found in your research or when working with people? Is there generally like one thing that comes
I've
up?
actually pinpointed 3 things.
Okay, great.
3 reasons that people procrastinate. And I'm actually working on a procrastination archetype framework. I've been saying that for a long time, but I'm working on basically presenting these different archetypes that people can see themselves in, and then figure out how to work with their natural personality type instead of pushing against themselves.
Nice.
So what I've pinpointed is that there's 3 reasons that people mostly procrastinate. So the reason you procrastinate, let's just start with this. The reason you procrastinate is always a feeling, 100% of the time.
Sorry, is always a what?
A feeling.
Okay.
Yeah. So whenever you're procrastinating, there's always a feeling there. And a lot of people will be like, no, I don't have a feeling. I'm like, no, there's a feeling. You just might not be aware of it. And so then what I pinpointed is that the feelings, there's 3, depending on your personality type. So the 3 reasons that people procrastinate. 1 is insecurity. So that's like your perfectionist who's like, I'm worried that it's not going to be right, or that people are going to find me out. And I'll be really curious what your answer is, which one you might relate to. The second type is, I'm worried that I won't be able to do it all. And that type of person spends a lot of time really overwhelmed trying to do all these things, but not being able to manage all of them at once. So that's the overwhelmed, I call that. So I call the first one the potential seeker, is the person who wants to do it right. The second person is the impact seeker. They want to do it all. And then the third person is the enjoyment seeker. So their worry is that they're going to be bored. And so the enjoyment seeker is like, I just want it to be interesting, and is always seeking pleasure and intrigue and enjoyment. And so when they sit down, their worry is it'll be boring.
Right.
So again, so the worries are, the first one is I worry I won't do it right. The second one is I worry I won't do it all. And the third one is I worry it won't be fun.
Right. Interesting. Really interesting. So,
yeah.
So as you were talking through this, I was like, I don't think she's going to be able to hit the reasons I procrastinate. Until
Challenge accepted.
and that was when you got to number 2, and then you said number 3, and number 3 is basically me. So
really,
so here's and you tell me if this resonates with number 3. But whenever I procrastinate, it's generally because it's an activity that I generally don't enjoy, or I know I'm not going to enjoy. And one of my tactics that I use to get through a task like that is to put certain music on, which sounds really weird, right? But just having that music on makes me enjoy the activity a lot more. And the activity is almost like not the first thing front and center. Or what I'll often do with a boring activity is again, this is strange habit. This is probably not a good thing, but I might leave it for the weekend, just because I've deferred it all week, and I'm like, this is more important, this is more interesting, this is more, and then suddenly I've got the weekend, and I've got, a couple of hours in between, and generally I'll use that for work. So I'll switch on Netflix, or I'll switch on Prime, and I'll do it alongside watching a series. Have you heard that before? Or
yeah. No, it's okay. So this is so fascinating. This is where I promised you off mic that I might accidentally coach you. So here we go. So the music piece, right? I said in my bio, I'm like, I love listening to reggaeton. And so I have a standing desk, and I'll just like blast. Yeah. I'll blast it. And I speak Spanish, and I love learning new lyrics. So I'm like, that totally helps get me in the zone. And Netflix too. Like I used to put on Friends, because I know every single episode of Friends, so I can like have it in the background. But the thing that I wonder if you're not seeing is you're like, these are boring tasks, as if they're inherently boring. But the reason that they're boring is because you have the thought, this is a boring task. Right? You formed an opinion, this is a boring task, and then you've confirmed it every single time you go to do that task. Right?
Yeah.
So I always explain it as I'm like, you're confirming your own belief system when you're like, see, it's boring. Okay, and you really want,
But okay, so challenge back.
Yeah. Please.
I'm not a massive fan of anything to do with accounting or financial admin. So how would I make that interesting, or how would I change my mindset to make that interesting? Because I'm not a big fan of it. And generally I'll have our accountant doing anything, but there's certain questions and queries that only someone like me can help with. And those are really certain things I despise of. Strong words, but how do I get over that?
Yeah. Okay. Well, so first of all, I think this is really important to say. You can just decide I'm going to despise it. Like that is totally an option, and not sarcastically. Like you can just be like, I'm going to despise this, period. Fine. It's if you're like, yeah, I actually don't want to despise it. I would like to see if this can be interesting to me. And you asked a really brilliant question, right? You asked it of me, but I would just have you turn that question around on yourself. How do I make this interesting? And then you answer that question. So let's just play this out. If you wanted to make accounting interesting, what might you do?
Put music on.
Okay. What else? What if there was no music?
Oh man. You're putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
So
you can always decline to answer.
But. No, it's all good. Let's deal with that challenge, right? Let's try to make accounting more fun. And I need to make sure my accountant doesn't watch this video. But,
they've probably heard it before.
Yeah, I think I've told her as well, and she can probably tell.
So wait, this is actually a really good thing. So your accountant, I'm like, this is how we know that this task is not inherently boring, because your accountant probably doesn't find it boring.
Yes,
right?
You're right.
You, Neil, have decided this is a boring task. So you kind of like alluded to this. Why does she find it so interesting? Or he? Or they?
She.
Okay.
One idea is it could be I might need to see the end-to-end a bit more. So I may need to see, like I'm focusing on that part, right. But actually if I see how it impacted that part and the numbers and the profits, which is something I find very interesting and most business owners do, then suddenly I can make that more interesting by doing that. So I know there's certain activities that I'm always just going to despise, and I know that. And
why?
To be honest, did you say why?
Yeah. Why are you so sure of that? Your face, I love it.
I think it's because I've done it so often that I know what's coming. I know what to expect. I think it's just a task that that is not related to marketing, is not related to growing a business, is so far removed from that it's to do with that linkage.
Right.
But I mean, my strategy is not to do those things and to focus on my time where I enjoy more, but I know I'm going to do a better job. And that's why I've got a great accountant in place, which I know is just going to take care of everything. And, she's got my back.
But the thing is that she's not going to take care of everything, right? If that was true, then you wouldn't have these tasks on your plate. And it's really interesting because you presented a really fascinating point. You're like, my brain is compartmentalizing this one task, which I despise. And if I saw the end to end and I saw the way that this task influences my profit, you basically said I might be interested.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's so easy to skip over that, but I'm like, what if that's your answer? What if that's how you make this interesting?
You make a strong argument there, Cristina.
It's kind of my job.
I will think about that as that task now comes up, and I'm sure I'll be messaging you to tell you how I've been with that. But you're right. It's interesting because there are certain activities that I'm sure I don't look forward to doing, or other business owners don't look forward to doing. But it's the way we're thinking about them. And my strategy right now is doing something fun or listening to music or watching Netflix and then doing it as part of that process. Right. So I'm actually doing it at the same time. And this is what I thought you were going to say earlier. I thought you were going to say, actually, Neil, that's not productive though, which isn't, right? So yeah, I think you've made a very strong argument. So just on that, when you've worked with other business owners and entrepreneurs with procrastination, you talk about the three kind of root causes or the type of people that fall into procrastination. Yeah. What are some common solutions or habits that you can instill other than the one that we've just spoken about to become more productive, to procrastinate less?
Yeah. So I think that it's really important to notice the way that our brains, and you asked this, but every other human who's interested in productivity, your first question is always, how can I do things differently? What actions can I take differently? And that's important, but the actions tend to fall in place when you get your mind right. Right? So right now you're trying to solve, I won't harp too much on the accounting thing, but a little bit. But you're trying to solve it by like taking an action of putting music on.
Yes.
And I'm saying, let's actually figure out what is your mindset, right? Buzzword from a life coach, but what is your mindset about the task that makes you think it's so boring? And let's work on that. and then the actions take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that really is what coaching is all about, is like going. So I like to think of it like this. You have actions, you have feelings that fuel those actions, and then the thoughts are what create the feelings. And so our work in coaching is always going back, well, what is your thought that's creating the feeling that's driving the action?
And now, just to extend that, can you give a particular example that pops up, in your head around someone that you've worked with, and specifically what their mindset has been, or specifically what their habit change has been, so that the audience can kind of like just think about it, not necessarily implement, but think about it and potentially just apply it for their business? Is there?
Yeah. This comes up so much. So someone will come to me, and actually I got an email the other day, and this person was like, I need to know what to-do list app you recommend. That's the missing piece of my productivity. And I emailed back, and I think you can tell I'm a little sassy. And I was like, bet you it's not. Bet you that's not the missing piece. Your brain thinks that this one tip or tool or system or app is going to solve procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
But what we really need to understand is, why is your brain overwhelmed, scared of doing it wrong, and seeking so much enjoyment?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'll say, okay, you can use an app or you can use a system, but make sure that you're choosing that app or system or plan or whatever it is from the place of like empowered and not desperate.
Yeah.
So that's like people could come to me and I could just be like, use this planner. But that planner is not going to work for you unless your mind is right.
Mm.
So I was explaining this to a client the other day. She was saying that somebody was telling her about this new software that was like a complete game changer and it changed everything for him. And I made the point, I was like, that's probably true. But what he doesn't say is that it works because he works it. Right? So the example I use is, I was like, you never hear someone go, I love this app. It's my favorite app. It totally changed my life. It's a complete game changer. Haven't logged in 6 months. Right? Yeah. When you're raving about how something's changed your life, it's because you're using that tool. So is that making sense to you, as like the difference between searching out a tool or a tip or strategy or whatever from a place of empowerment versus I'm desperate and this is going to hopefully solve my problem?
That does. It kind of reminds me of some of the businesses that we work with, where they approach us and they're very specific and they say, we need this. But actually through a half an hour conversation or some initial research, actually what they need is something different. And what they've done is they've defined the solution. They haven't defined the problem.
Yes. So
they're trying to almost fit a solution into a non-existent problem that does generally solve some of that issue. And my light has just turned off, so
I didn't even notice.
Great. So but it doesn't solve the entire problem. And actually, once you define the issue, you can be more efficient with the solution. It reminds me of when I used to work in investment banking as a project manager. A large part of my job was actually just defining requirements. And most of the conversation that would come our way from the business would be, hey, we need this. But actually doing a deep dive into the issues, over a number of years, you start developing an intuition that a bit like what you were doing with me or what you do with your clients, right? It's, yeah, well, I can help you with this, but why don't we look at the overall picture here and see how we can really solve it, like really, really solve it for you. So I love that you share that. So I guess with that, is there, taking that example of the to-do list, and actually you need more help around your mindset, can you talk about some of the root causes that you face when you're working with businesses and entrepreneurs that that kind of lead to an unproductive person working on unproductive things or procrastination?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't mean to be a broken record, but I think it really does go back to those 3 different personality types. And so I'll give an example. I love that you're what I call the enjoyment seeker, because that's actually the type of person that I don't meet as often. Most people, I would say the majority of people that I meet are the first one, the potential seeker, where they're really concerned about doing it right, and it shows up in perfectionism.
Right.
I am the impact seeker. And so like, if you remember, what that means is I'm like, I'm going to do it all. I have so many opportunities. Oh my gosh, I'm going to miss all the opportunities, right? And if I don't manage my mind, and if I don't coach myself and get coaching, then I just spin out. I'm like, I have all these ideas and I need to implement all of them. And I'll like get into just kind of winging it with like all of these massive ideas, right? And then I get overwhelmed. And then if I'm not managing myself, then that looks like procrastination, because I'm like, I can't handle it all. Might as well just take a step back. And so I think that that's just helpful to paint a picture of that other type of person, the kind of overcommitter who scatters their attention in a ton of different directions. And so some of the solutions that I found that work for me is, one, really recognizing that I can have a billion ideas and I don't need to implement all of them. It's still hard for me. But I write 3 pages every single morning, and I just have ideas and ideas and ideas. And I don't know if have you ever done the Strengths Finder test?
I haven't, no.
So it basically shows you, they've like mapped out these 34 strengths that people have. Right. And so one of my top 5 strengths is ideation, which means I generate ideas. And so I basically have had to make peace with letting go of needing to implement every single idea. And so I do a lot of really proactive planning, is like mapping out my business, mapping out my personal life in advance, because I know that if I don't do that, I'll just be throwing my attention in all these different directions.
Yeah, I love that you say that. It sounds like me as well. And I had to make peace with not being able to. In fact, I used to, on my phone, I had an Evernote just for ideas. And unless I plan specifically what it is I need to do, suddenly an idea would come onto my to-do list.
Isn't it amazing how that happens? Yeah. All of a sudden you're like, I have like multiple half-written books where I'm like, kind of came out of me, right? They just like fell onto the paper, and I'm like, that's interesting. So I think that to your original question is like the root cause. The root cause, I realize, of pretty much all of my challenges, at least in business, is this recurring thought: I want to do it all. I want to do it all. I want to do it all. I'm going to miss opportunities. So it can also show up as scarcity. I'm like, I can't let go of this idea. Maybe I'll never get an idea again in my entire life. Right? Or if you go back to that first personality type in terms of root cause, they have a recurring thought of like, I'm not going to do it right. I'm not going to do it right. People are going to find out I'm not doing it right. Right? It has to be perfect. So then you can work with all of those different thoughts, show clients how those thoughts are actually showing up in their lives and creating results that they don't want. And then you work to change those beliefs. Interesting.
Very, very interesting. So, and that reminds me, when I first quit in 2017, it was just me. We didn't have a team, didn't have an accountant either. Actually, no, I think we did, but we were working with her less. So I was taking on more of that side of things as well. And you know how interesting I find all of that.
Right.
But yeah, exactly. You need to get your mindset right, Cristina, for this.
I'll work on it.
And what I found for that first year, that 18 months of running a business for the first time, wearing multiple hats, doing a bit of this, bit of that, bit of this. The biggest problem back then was around growing the business and getting enough clients. But I had all this other stuff going on. So what would you recommend a similar business owner who in that situation doesn't really have a team, is doing the work, but at the same time doing the marketing, doing the sales, doing the accounting, doing the finance? How do you plan and prioritize and stay on top of it all? Have you got any techniques that you can share?
Absolutely. I love this question. So one of the terms that I have been hearing everywhere, and it's so fitting, is reverse engineering. And so that's the idea of looking at what is the result that I want to create? What are all of the actions that I would need to take in order to get that result? And then what is the feeling that's going to fuel that action? What are the thoughts that are going to create that feeling, right? So it's basically everything we just talked about, but backwards. So results first. And one thing that I do, I teach a method called Monday Hour One, which is where you map out your entire week on Monday and you actually schedule it onto your calendar. And then you expect that you're not going to want to do it, but you do it anyway. You learn about yourself in the process. But one of the things that I do first with my Monday Hour One, like if I make a Google Doc of everything I need to do, right at the top, I write result. And that's where I map out, this is the result that I want by the time I close my computer on Friday afternoon or Thursday afternoon sometimes if I'm feeling wild.
Nice.
And so that basically makes your mind start generating the most high priority, high impact tasks, actions that you need to do in order to get that result. Because, so I really encourage people watching to try this, and I encourage you to try this as well if you're not doing it. But when your brain just goes, here's all the things I need to do this week, your brain's going to give you a billion different things in a billion different directions, right? You're like, all these people are emailing me. But as soon as you go, this is the result that I want by the end of this week, your brain goes to task, sorting out all the BS and narrowing in on the actions that are going to have the most impact.
Give me an example.
Perfect example. I have a giant revenue goal by September 15th. And my brain is like, I could do this, I could do that, I could do that. I could get revenue from this and this and this and this, right? Unmanaged, my mind's like, there's 100 different ways. But as soon as I go, okay, what do I know about my business? And one thing that I really know about my business is when people have live interactions with me, they convert at a much higher level. So that's either on a one-on-one consult or in one of my live workshops where we're actually going back and forth. So immediately I'm like, I don't need to worry about all these different strategies. The only thing I need to do is get 200 people to my workshops. That's it.
Is that a paid workshop?
It's at $50, but you get your money back if you show up.
Got it.
But my, like, again, untrained and unmanaged, my brain could have a billion different ideas. And it's like, do this social media and that and well, everything.
Yeah.
And as soon as I narrow in and like the way I'm going to sell and get X amount of revenue is by getting FaceTime with people. How I'm going to get FaceTime with people is setting up recurring workshops and emailing people about it. And all of a sudden, instead of 100 actions, I have basically like 4 super solid actions.
Nice. I really like that.
It's helpful because my brain does not want to do that naturally at all.
So I do weekly planning. I've thought about, I've never extended it to the fact to the actually putting it into my calendar. I've always avoided that. And I think just for me personally, I don't like the idea of being chained to a calendar. Whereas what I do like is a notebook, and I've got, I'll show you my notebook. That's my notebook, and I will put my to-do list of what I plan to achieve that day. And then I've got the week view. And it's funny because I had a Google Doc with my to-do list, but I physically like to see it in front of me on a piece of paper and just remind myself. And the feeling of ticking off just feels great, that I look forward to it. And it really works for me. I remember the team last week were talking about how they love in Asana. We use Asana for our clients. Yeah. How they love how there's a unicorn that appears every time you clear a task. So yeah, that's funny. But I really love the idea of aiming for a feeling or a result for that week, and then going and then keeping your priorities and your tasks focused on that result. I really like that. I think I'm gonna try that.
Yeah, dude, it's one of those things that as soon as you start doing, you're like, oh my gosh, how have I not been doing this? This is obviously the most logical way to plan backwards from a result that I want, but I didn't do it for years.
So, it's becoming normal working from home. And I'll give you my situation. It feels like I'm using myself as a guinea pig through this interview, but let's carry on, hey?
Yeah.
3-year-old at home with a wife. 3-year-old often comes into this room, Sienna, and jumps on me or jumps on the screen and wants to see on our website we've got bubbles, so she loves popping the bubbles. It's crazy 4 or 5 months of working from home, trying to plan work, trying to get stuff done and manage a family. And so what I found myself is, whilst I can get it all done, it's not the nicest way of getting it done. It's long hours, it's stop start in between, and I'll often work till 7-8 p.m, not constantly, or 9 p.m, or a 10 o'clock call in the night, not necessarily constantly, but stop start throughout. What would you, and I think working from home is going to become the norm, and it's definitely a behavioral shift we're seeing in the kind of workplace. What would you recommend? Have you got any, like, a particular strategy that would work quite well for this particular situation?
Yeah. So I teach a method called How to Get into a Deep Work State in 15 Minutes. And it's actually step by step what you need to prepare to do focused work. So that is like, that's my go-to when I work with clients who are like, I want to carve out 60 to 90 minutes to go heads down and get my work done. But my question for you first would be, do you want that? Like, do you like that your daughter comes in and pops bubbles? Is that a fun, enjoyable part of your day that you want to keep?
Great question. It is, actually.
Yeah. So your brain goes, I want to keep this fun bubble time with my daughter, and this is not the most effective way to work.
Yes.
But when you're allowing in, I don't even like to call it interruptions, but when you're allowing your daughter to come in, own that decision. It's like, yeah, this is what I want. I'm willing to not be as focused in order to have this quality time. Because do you see the way otherwise your brain kind of is in constant conflict? You're like family time and daughter or productive work.
Yes.
So when we have conflicting beliefs, this is what I always do with clients. I'm like, bring out all your conflicting beliefs. I like to think of like a silver platter of all your conflicting beliefs and reconcile them. So you already answered the question of like, yeah, I want to let my daughter in. Do you want to put any boundaries around that at all? Or is she just free to come in at any time?
I think putting boundaries would sound sensible. There isn't any boundaries at the moment.
Yeah. It doesn't honestly, there's no right or wrong. Like, you could just decide like, no, it's a free for all. She can totally come in whenever she wants.
I think your first question around, do you actually want her to come in? And the answer is yes. It reminds me of our conversation about having new ideas and just coming to peace with the fact that actually you don't need to implement ideas. And I think this similar situation is, I need to get the work done, but I also want to have time with my daughter and kind of have this random fun that we generally have, and just coming to peace with that and recognizing it as a conflict. Immediately I feel much better.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy. So
what is your thought now as opposed to what it was before we had this conversation?
I think it's more around, it's I need boundaries, but I'm going to accept that this is also how my day looks like. Yeah.
Isn't that, it's like incredible how fast it can change. You're just like, oh yeah, this is the time of the pandemic and working from home. And this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
I have a client who has been really stressed out. So she works at a company, and it's just been a really wild time. And so one of my questions that I'll always ask is like, what can you say no to? And if a client is like, I cannot say no to anything, I truly I have to and want to say yes to everything that's being presented to me, then what I offer is I'm like, what if that's just how it's supposed to be right now? The reason you're so tired about your 12-hour days is not because they're 12-hour days. It's because you have these thoughts like, I shouldn't be working 12 hours. But if you just accept that right now is a period of 12-hour days, you can often just like relax and you move into a place of acceptance. And for anyone who's like, but I mean, 12-hour days are very long. I just think, especially as an entrepreneur, we probably have all had the experience where you're like, you've worked 12 hours without stopping and you're not tired because you're just so energized.
Yep.
And again, not to harp on it, but it always comes back to what were your thoughts about the 12-hour day, right? It's not like a 12-hour day is just a neutral circumstance, but it's your thoughts during that 12-hour day that are going to create how you feel about it.
Okay. So Cristina, we're going to transition to how you've grown the business and what's worked really well for you. So you mentioned, and I love the fact that you mentioned this in this way, which is people are more likely to buy from you when they've seen you in person through a workshop. So can you just talk us through, the strategy that's worked for you so the people that are listening in can, take something away for their business and maybe even just start implementing it for themselves?
Definitely. I will say I'm very, very much still in experimentation stage. And so I have experimented with everything under the sun. I actually was writing up, speaking of Evernote, I wrote up a list of like things that I was doing early on in my business versus now. So like, I had so many things that I was doing. Like, for example, I would run webinars. But what I realized running webinars is they work. I know that they work. They work brilliantly for some people. I hated feeling like I was talking into a black hole. Even with the like chat or the Q&A, I hated it. I would feel drained. I didn't feel like people were really getting value. And that's when I started having the idea of like, instead of doing that, why don't we do a small, intimate, live workshop where I can actually go back and forth with people, because that's how they get value and that's how I get energy. So I did, so much experimentation. Another thing that I've changed is I was doing free mini sessions where I would just get on with people. Anyone could sign up, no criteria, and I would just coach them. And it was amazing. And nobody was buying. And so I finally, like slowly but surely, was like, I'm just going to do consults. And consults are going to be for people who are on the cusp of buying coaching packages, who are actually ready. And I'll prime them on email marketing. And then by the time they get actually on the phone with me, they're going to be almost ready. And so that was a total game changer. But the only reason that I got to that, again, experimenting. And I know that that's not sexy. Like for entrepreneurs, like, what if there's just a tried and true strategy?
Yep.
But my firm belief is it can all work.
Yes.
You just have to choose your outlet. So my go-tos for marketing, email marketing, 100%. Like that is my one central meeting place for everything. And I would push email marketing on anyone all day if you want to do it and you're doing it. And then I have a podcast that's on hiatus right now. I don't love podcasting, to be honest, because there's no back and forth. And so I basically have really decided that the way that I get energy, the way that people get value is live. And so that's where I basically put all my energy to converting people. And then I have an amazing Facebook ads manager. So that's been a huge part of the strategy, is getting people into the fold, is through a 10-minute procrastination fix. And so that's been how we've built the email list. Interesting.
Okay. So you're using Facebook ads to get in front of new audiences. They hit your landing page. They download their 10-minute procrastination fix, which I saw the landing page, and I just felt like it really hit the nail on the head when I read that.
Good.
And so they'll go through the email list and then they'll book a strategy call or whatever you call it. And it's at that point they'll decide to buy or not to buy.
Yeah. Either a consult or they'll get on one of the workshops, and I sell on those workshops too. They're an hour long and I sell for probably like maximum 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But it's like, here's some incredible value.
Yeah.
Want to take it to the next level?
Right. And with those workshops, you mentioned they're not like a webinar style workshop. They're more, what is it? Like a group workshop where they can ask you questions.
Exactly. Everyone's on video. So I basically say I do $50 totally refundable deposit if you show up and you're on video. I had to add that terminology, right? More experimenting. I would have people show up not on video, and it just totally changes the dynamic. And so I basically just added the stipulation: if you show up and you're on video, you'll get your money back. And that is like I'm actually right after this, I'm leading one, and it's so interactive. And so, yeah, then people are like, maybe there's something to this whole coaching mindset thing. And then the other thing that I do a lot, and that's why I responded to you when you cold pitched me. I love it because I pitch like crazy. So I'll pitch people to be on their podcast. I pitch to run workshops with different organizations. So that's something that I love doing. I love pitching out of the blue. I think it's really fun. I recommend it.
Awesome. And so that's pitching to be on a podcast or to run a workshop or to speak or something like that.
I'm always so pleasantly surprised by how often people are like, of course.
That's awesome. So I know you need to run soon.
Yes.
And I think this has been great. I've enjoyed it. I've got a ton of value just for myself. I know there's a couple of things on my to-do list, right? I need to stop hating and disliking the accounting activities. I need to maybe work on that mindset. I love the advice that you shared about working from home. There's some acceptance that we have to go through, and then boundaries as well. I love the way you're so sure of what it is you're doing, and I guess this is almost like one of the easiest things to say, but one of the hardest things to do is just being self-aware of what you're good at, what you enjoy, as you said, where you get the most energy from in your marketing. You get a lot of energy in your email marketing and jumping on workshops. So why not focus on that? And I love the fact that you recognized the fact that actually podcasting isn't going to be your go-to or something that you enjoy. I'm similar to you as well. I prefer having a conversation as opposed to just talking to myself. So I love the fact that you shared that. So I know the audience are going to get a ton of value from this. Just before we close out, where can people find more about you?
Yeah, I would love for people to come to piquecoaching.co. So that's PIQUE coaching.co, not .com. And I would love to see people over there. Thank you so much for having me. I'm sorry to rush off.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Cristina. This was great.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.